few days ago, on our way to St. John's, Newfoundland, our engine started sputtering and losing power. After a bit of exploration, we discovered that the problem was a small hole in the rubber insulation of one of our spark plug wires. The hole was allowing the electrical charge to arc with the exterior metal surface of the engine, instead of igniting the fuel in that particular cylinder. As a temporary fix, we wrapped the wire with electrical tape to serve as makeshift insulation and stop the arcing. That got us through the next few days, but as soon as we were able, we picked up some new wires so that we could replace the entire set. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this is done, as I'm certainly not a professional and I don't want to risk giving any bad advice. But for those interested in how we made this repair while on the road, I figured it was worth showing the basic process. Before I do that though, it's probably not a bad idea to briefly explain how this part of the engine works and why fixing the problem was so important. As with most vehicles on the road today, our van has what's called an internal combustion engine. Combustion because it's powered by burning fuel, in this case gasoline, and internal because the burning happens inside the engine. So burning typically means fire, and that's where the spark plug comes in. The spark plug uses electricity from the battery to produce a powerful spark which ignites a mixture of fuel, gasoline, and oxygen from the air. Why would we want to do that? Well, that mini explosion is what's used to push down the piston inside the cylinder, which in turn cranks the shaft which provides mechanical power to move the vehicle. So fuel and air are drawn into the cylinder, and momentum from the previous mini explosion causes the piston to compress the mixture and the spark plug ignites it, causing the whole process to repeat over and over. This is obviously an oversimplified explanation, but it should hopefully illustrate why proper functioning spark plugs are so important. Without them, nothing happens. Now our van has a V8 engine. This basically just means that there are 8 of these cylinders, pistons, and spark plugs. And therefore, 8 of those mini explosions, all happening in a particular order to contribute to the cranking of the engine and therefore increasing the power of our vehicle. Since the timing of those mini explosions is so important, there are a couple more parts that we need to discuss. The power directly from the battery is a little too weak for our purposes, so it first needs to connect to the ignition coil. The coil ramps up the electrical power and then sends it towards the spark plugs. But since there are 8 of them, that electrical current must first go to the distributor. This part of the system decides exactly which spark plug is supposed to fire next, and distributes the electrical current accordingly. Once again, this is an oversimplification, but it's all we need to understand in order to replace these wires and get back on the road. So the first step is to remove the old wires, but because they are each a different length, I decided to do one at a time. That way I could lay all of the new wires on the ground, and by comparing the old ones one at a time, I could make sure that I got the right one for that particular plug. Next, I removed the old spark plug. This is mostly just because spark plugs are relatively cheap, so if I'm already going to all the trouble of replacing the wires, I might as well make sure that the plugs are new as well. If you can, you should try to use a proper spark plug socket, which has a rubber section inside to grip the spark plug as you pull it out. That's because the spark plug works by the electrical current arcing the very specific gap between the tip and the little metal arm. If the plug were to drop out of a normal socket, it might bend the arm and alter the gap. Now, making sure that no dust gets inside the opening to the cylinder, we carefully insert the new spark plug. Your service manual will likely indicate exactly how snug these should be screwed in for your particular vehicle. Now it's time for the new wire. We already compared the old one with the new wires we'd laid on the ground, so it's as simple as snapping one end onto the spark plug and the other onto the distributor. For a V8 engine, there will be 8 spark plug wires, plus a 9th longer wire, which connects the distributor to the coil. It's connected in exactly the same way. And that's it. All that's left is to start the engine and make sure everything still works as it's supposed to. Let's see. Luckily, the engine started normally and sounded good. As an extra precaution, we decided to keep a few of the old wires as backups, just in case. And with that all taken care of, we were back on the road.